3 fake HOA enforcers raided Walter Briggs's home and tried to break into sealed county evidence, right in front of his daughter. Their leader, Jack Kearns, was a self-appointed tyrant who thought a clipboard gave him legal power. But Walter wasn't just a homeowner. He was the county's lead evidence clerk, and he had every move recorded. What happened next turned their fake authority into felony charges, and you won't believe how justice shut them down for good. It was a quiet Thursday morning in Grafton Falls, Virginia, the kind of morning where the hum of a coffee pot and the faint ticking of a wall clock were the loudest sounds in Walter Briggs's home office. He was deep into his routine, eyes locked on his computer screen, cross-referencing serial numbers on sealed evidence containers for the county's digital intake logs. Walter wasn't just any paperwork pusher. He was the senior evidence clerk for York County. Everything from seized contraband to disputed property came through his desk, to be meticulously logged and secured in chain of custody storage. It wasn't glamorous, but it required precision and trust. That trust shattered the moment his phone rang. "Dad, there's a group of guys in vests in the house. They said they're with the HOA and they're searching the basement." Lily's voice cracked. She was 16, alone, and terrified. Walter froze. His hand trembled as he set the tablet down. He didn't ask any questions. He grabbed his keys and was out the door in seconds. His mind raced on the 10-minute drive home. His neighborhood wasn't dangerous. It was a private community with white fences, bird feeders, and an HOA board that cared more about lawn height than safety. But lately, things had shifted, ever since Jack Kearns took over as board president. Jack wasn't elected. He was appointed after the last president moved out. A former house flipper with a shiny smile and a clipboard, he'd declared himself Director of Compliance Enforcement. He'd printed badges, rewritten bylaws, and even hired part-time consultants to help him with so-called neighborhood patrols. Most folks rolled their eyes. Walter hadn't. He'd called Jack out at the last board meeting, accusing him of pretending to have legal authority. Jack didn't like that. Now, as Walter turned the corner into his cul-de-sac, his stomach dropped. 3 men were on his lawn, all wearing black tactical vests with patches reading Community Compliance Officer. One held a camera, another had a binder stuffed with loose paperwork. A third was standing at the threshold of Walter's open front door, clipboard in one hand, zip ties in the other. Walter parked fast and rushed forward. Through the open door, he caught a glimpse of his daughter, standing at the top of the basement stairs, frozen, clutching her phone. Inside, the men were mid-search. They hadn't broken anything yet, but they moved with fake confidence, tugging at locked cabinet handles, peering into crates. One read off a printout. "You are in violation of HOA Regulation 14B, Section 9, unauthorized hazardous material storage. This is a compliance sweep." "This is a private home," Walter said sharply from the doorway. The man with the clipboard barely looked up. "We gave proper notice. Article 4 of the Community Safety Addendum allows HOA inspection in the event of a suspected hazard. You're listed as non-compliant." Walter stepped inside, voice ice cold. "You're not law enforcement, and you have no right to be here." The tallest one, the one with pepper spray on his belt, lifted his camera higher. "This is for legal documentation." Walter's eyes flicked toward the basement door, wide open. They were filming everything, in his home, without a warrant, in front of his daughter. And they were about to walk straight into the secure evidence containers he kept in a climate-controlled room, containers that belonged to the sheriff's office. His heart pounded. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that Walter wasn't just some stubborn neighbor. He was the man who logged every single piece of county-held evidence in a 30-mile radius. And the moment they opened one of those cases, they'd be in more trouble than they could imagine. Walter pulled into his driveway with the urgency of a first responder, because in a way, he was one. The government-issued credentials clipped to his neck glinted in the morning sun, just beneath the embroidered patch that read York County Evidence Division. His hazard lights flashed as he stepped out and approached the scene with slow, deliberate steps. His daughter Lily was outside now, wrapped in a blanket by a neighbor, her face streaked with tears. She wouldn't stop looking at the house, at the front door still wide open, at the strangers moving around inside like they owned the place. Walter's jaw tightened. One of them, bald, barrel-chested, and holding a crowbar for no clear reason, was kneeling in front of a sealed evidence container on the floor near the basement stairs. The label was clear as daylight. Controlled firearms, do not open, property of York County Sheriff's Office. And still, the man kept trying to unhook the latches. Walter stepped into the house without raising his voice. Calm, steady, but if you knew him, you'd recognize the storm in his silence. Step away from that crate, he said. Clipboard guy froze. Pepper spray guy looked up, halfway through unzipping a gear bag, and the crowbar clattered to the floor as the third man stood like a student caught cheating on a final exam. Walter didn't wait for a response. He moved to his daughter, placing one hand gently on her shoulder, then turned to face the man standing smugly at the edge of the lawn. Jack Kearns, khakis, aviators, and arms folded, like he was posing for a brochure. His tone when he spoke was soaked in false authority. "This is an HOA-sanctioned inspection, Mr. Briggs," he said coolly. "You've been in violation of Article 7, hazardous material storage. We have full rights to enter for community safety." Walter squared his shoulders, his voice low and even. "You just ordered forced entry into the home of a government official. You brought unauthorized personnel into a secure area, and you're now on camera tampering with county-sealed evidence containers." Jack raised his eyebrows, but didn't flinch. "We gave you notice. You ignored 3 written warnings. You brought this on yourself. You've got crates, containers. Who knows what else down there? You expect us to just ignore it?" Walter's eyes narrowed. "What I expect is that you don't impersonate law enforcement and illegally search private property. You are not a government agency. You're a homeowner with a clipboard." Jack's smirk returned. "You think you're untouchable because you got a badge and a title? You think that puts you above the HOA? Walter stepped forward, close enough for Jack to finally feel the tension in the air. "I'm not above the HOA, he said flatly. "I'm just not beneath it." Jack's expression shifted, not to regret or worry, but something worse, defiance. The kind of arrogant belief that he could still win this, that he'd gone too far to back down, and somehow, some way, still had the upper hand. Walter didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped a number marked York County Sheriff Direct. He spoke just 5 words. "This is Briggs. I need backup." Then he walked past Jack like he didn't exist, back toward his daughter, because the moment the cruisers arrived, Jack and his little fantasy force were going to find out exactly how real the consequences could be. The first patrol car pulled into the cul-de-sac with its lights on but siren off, quiet, professional, like they already knew what they were walking into. Then came the second. Then a third. By the time the 4th car arrived, the street was lined with uniformed deputies stepping out with calm authority, hands resting on their belts, their expressions unreadable but alert. They didn't hesitate. The first 3 officers, the so-called community compliance officers, were quickly surrounded and separated. Orders were barked crisply. "Hands where we can see them." "Step away from that crate." "Turn around." One of the men, clipboard guy, was already sweating. Another had tried to slip something into his vest pocket, but a deputy caught the motion. A concealed stun gun. Another officer fished a laminated card from the man's chest pocket. "Federal Compliance Division," it read in bold letters. Except that division didn't exist. And the badge? Plastic. Then came the binder. Inside it, forged search warrants with fake signatures, a seal that vaguely resembled the county clerk's, and several highlighted documents titled Community Emergency Action Plan, none of which had any legal basis. Deputy Granger, a tall woman with a clipped voice and zero tolerance for nonsense, turned toward the man lingering on the sidewalk. Jack Kearns. He'd been slowly backing away, trying to look casual, arms crossed, then hands in pockets, then casually moving behind a neighbor's car like he was just another bystander. "Sir," Granger called out, "stay where you are." Jack froze. "You're listed as the primary coordinator of this operation. You're being detained pending investigation." Jack's composure cracked like cheap glass. "What? I thought it was legal. This is all in the HOA bylaws. We voted. This is protocol. I sent emails." Walter stepped forward, calm and deliberate, and handed Deputy Granger a slim black USB drive. "It's all on here," he said. "Security footage from my home system, entry times, audio recordings, copies of the letters Jack sent to the HOA board, including the one where he calls this a test raid for future enforcement. Granger took the drive without a word. Another deputy unzipped a sealed pouch and began photographing the evidence containers Jack's men had tampered with. One of them had visible pry marks. Then the arrest began. The fake officers were cuffed and read their rights. Jack protested louder with every passing second. "This is a misunderstanding. I was doing my duty. This community needs order." Walter didn't speak. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than Jack ever could. Charges were read out on the spot: impersonating law enforcement, unlawful entry, attempted tampering with state-logged materials, unlawful detainment of a minor, and more to follow pending review. Jack kept shouting about how he was being targeted, about how this was personal, about how he had every right to inspect a known hazard. His voice cracked as the deputies closed the cruiser door behind him. But no one responded, because no one believed him anymore. 2 months had passed. The summer haze had lifted from Grafton Falls, and with it, so had the tension that once clouded every conversation on the block. But inside the HOA clubhouse, once a symbol of fear and forced compliance, a new kind of meeting was underway. Walter Briggs sat at the front of the room, not as a target, not as a bystander, but as the newly elected interim president of the Homeowners Association. The very same folding chairs that Jack Kearns once arranged in rows of intimidation were now occupied by neighbors, real people, teachers, retirees, parents, people who, for the first time in a long while, felt safe enough to speak openly. There were no tactical vests, no badges, no fake authority, just printed agendas, lemon bars from Mrs. Whitaker down the street, and the scent of fresh paint on the walls. Jack Kearns? He wasn't even allowed within a half-mile of the development anymore. After his arrest, the county filed multiple felony charges: impersonation of an officer, illegal detainment, evidence tampering. His so-called compliance team had quickly flipped, agreeing to plea deals in exchange for turning over group chats, emails, and handwritten plans that confirmed Jack had orchestrated the entire stunt. One even admitted Jack promised he'd rewrite the rulebook once the board backed him with more authority. But that never happened. Instead, the HOA had launched a full internal review, and for the first time in years, residents came together, not in fear, but in unity. They held an emergency vote. Jack was removed, the board bylaws were amended, and Walter, the man who once wanted nothing to do with HOA politics, was chosen to guide the community out of the mess it had been dragged into. His first order of business? The immediate and permanent dissolution of the compliance enforcement program, stripping the board of any power to conduct patrols, inspections, or unauthorized actions in residents' homes. His second, banning private security contracts without a public vote and county oversight. But the final touch, the one that drew a standing ovation from the entire room, was a quote Walter had personally chosen, now stenciled in crisp, bold lettering across the back wall of the clubhouse: "Power ends where the law begins." It was more than a slogan. It was a promise that no one in Grafton Falls would ever again be bullied under the false pretense of order. That real authority came with responsibility and accountability. And that justice, when patient and well-prepared, always has the final word.